I kill somebody, I want to hide the body. They wanted it to be found.
She was charged with suffocating her 6-year-old daughter.
An unspeakable crime.
And the mom, the tail was just right in this place.
The killer sent away for the rest of her life.
You didn't smother her. Drive to a deserted road.
It doesn't look like anybody's ever been here. Hello? And if you were allowed to testify,
she probably never would have been convicted.
A mother searches for the truth from behind prison walls.
Do you know who murdered Taylor?
I think I do, yes.
My name is Jerry Pallas. I'm a former NYPD detective. Court TV asked me and my partner, fellow NYPD detective Reggie Britt, to look into the 1991 murder of 6-year-old Taylor Fargusen. The murder has sparked controversy in Georgia, igniting claims that the wrong person is behind bars. You have some time now? I want to talk to you about the Fargusen case. On a Sunday evening in June 1991, the child's mother, Teresa Fargusen, says she took her daughter to a grocery store in Macon, Georgia. According to Teresa, a few minutes later, she realized that Taylor was missing, and she began searching the store. With no sign of her daughter, Teresa became frantic and asked an employee for help. The police were called in, and about an hour later, Taylor was found dead by the side of a road in a rural area about 6 miles away from the store. The investigation dragged on, and over a year later, the police announced that finally they had a suspect. When it was all over, Teresa Fargusen was found guilty of murdering her daughter and sentenced to life in prison. To this day, Fargusen insists that she's innocent and is the victim of a police department cover-up meant to protect one of their own, a former Macon cop, who Fargusen says is the real killer.
I mean, she may be the wrong person. We won't know till we get there.
If Teresa's claims are true, then an innocent woman is behind bars and a child killer is out walking the streets. We went down to Georgia to see if we could find out the truth, once and for all.
Well, from what we know, there wasn't too much physical evidence, if any.
This happened in June 1991.
Right.
This girl wasn't arrested until
it was like a year and a half later. This guy's her appeals attorney, right? Finley?
Yes, he is. He's
the appeals attorney.
First stop was in an Atlanta suburb. We wanted to talk to Drew Finley, Teresa Fargusen's lawyer.
We'll have to find out from him what he's got. And,
yeah, he should clear up a lot of this for us.
This is the beginning of the journey, man.
I want you to give us the facts of the case.
Okay.
How this happened to Teresa.
June 9th of 1991, Teresa Fargusen was at home with her 6-year-old daughter, Taylor. At approximately 9 o'clock that evening, she gathered her daughter up and took her to a Kroger grocery store. She lost contact with her, started running around the aisles looking for her, and started calling out her name. Immediately, people came to her aid. They started looking. She was not found. Approximately 11 o'clock that night, she was found on a service road on the side of a highway. A deputy coroner showed up. He immediately said, Taylor's been dead from sometime between 7 and 9. All attention was drawn to Teresa Fargusen at that time. Given that she had been at the Kroger sometime past 9, she immediately became a suspect in the case.
Okay, so she becomes a suspect at that point?
For 9.5 months, she was not arrested. For 9.5 months, there was no evidence found to support that she had anything to do with this death. And what do we have? We've got a woman that, as far as I'm concerned, is sitting in jail for the remainder of her natural life, who's innocent. And how anybody in law enforcement and how anybody in prosecution can go to sleep at night knowing what they've done is atrocious.
In the summer of 1980, Teresa Fargusen moved to Georgia from her hometown of Talladega, Alabama. A few years later, she met Charlie Fargusen. The couple married in February 1984, and 10 months later, Taylor was born. When they divorced in 1990, Teresa took sole custody of Taylor and decided to stay in Macon so that Taylor could be near her father for weekend visitations.
Hello, Mr. Charles Fargusen, please? Ms. Fargusen, how do you do? This is Jerry Pallas from Court TV. Okay, I was wondering if it'd be possible to come see you. We wanted to speak to you since you're her ex-husband and father of, Right.
Charlie didn't want to talk to us on camera, but he did say that he thought the right person was behind bars.
You had stood behind her, but then you changed when, for some reason...
When he took the stand at Teresa's trial, it was evident why he turned against his ex-wife.
And you are convinced now that Teresa did it on you?
She failed 3 lie detectors tests, didn't she?
No, sir, she didn't.
I believe she did.
No, sir, she did not. Did not. Is that what the police told you?
She told me at the gravesite.
She told you at the gravesite?
Teresa did, yeah.
Okay, Reg, this is it.
This is a Kroger's.
It was Teresa's second trip to the store that day, a fact that heightened the suspicions of the police.
This is the same time of night.
Yeah.
10 o'clock.
This is a big
That's
store.
a full-time
full-time
this
thing,
place.
yeah.
I mean, look, you know, people going in, the cars are moving in and out on a regular basis here, so.
On the first trip, she says she purchased the ingredients to make a recipe from scratch. But when it got too late, she claims she changed her mind and returned to the store in order to buy a ready-made dish instead.
Within an hour's time, some woman discovers the body, short distance from here. You know what? Let's go take a look at that. Let's go to the crime scene. Okay.
According to the prosecution's theory, Teresa's second trip to the Kroger that night was nothing more than an attempt to create an alibi. They theorized that she killed Taylor between 8:30 and 10 p.m. in her home, and then drove to the outskirts of town and dumped the body on the side of the road.
This is it. I get an eerie feeling. Huh? Oh, man. See? Mm-hmm. Yeah, this is it. Look at this. Somebody opens the door, just puts the body down right there. Takes it out of that, off this front seat, back seat, whatever, and puts the kid right down.
The light shines on this part of the road. It's not even, what, 4 to 5 feet from the pavement.
I ask myself, why this person just take the body? You're leaving it here to be found, right?
Yeah, 'cause
you're not
if they
leaving it here.
wanted to.
You're not looking to hide anything.
If they wanted to, they should have taken it a little further and have been
Right.
in the woods.
I mean, it wouldn't take that long to put a body into the woods. This is a pretty deserted road.
They wanted it to be found. But maybe not that quick, but they wanted her to be found.
Yeah. Man.
Let's get out of
Let's
here.
go, Richard. Makes the hair on the back of my neck stand up, something like this.
There's a police officer who had been following us.
I mean, do you think he had something to do with it?
I do, yes.
Teresa Fargusen was sent to prison in 1993, and her first shot at parole was denied in late 2000. If she had taken a plea bargain she was offered before trial, she would have been out by now. Instead, it looks like Washington State Prison, a maximum security facility in eastern Georgia, is where she'll spend the rest of her life.
Prior to this happening, she seemed to be a normal, all-American person, you know, working big jobs, trying to raise a kid.
I mean, I don't know if she's guilty or innocent, but coming here, I always like to think that, as far as I'm concerned, they're guilty because they've been proved guilty, you know?
In the court of law.
Right. Now I want her to convince us otherwise. We'll hear what she has to say to us. I want you to take us back. Tell us about that day.
We went to the beach and spent the day at the beach. We had gone to one of the little self-serve car cleaning areas to get the sand out of my car. I was vacuuming out the trunk, and she came up and handed me this beat-up teddy bear and asked me, could she keep him, that a policeman had given them to her. That's when all of it started, and it's only been recently that we found out actually what happened.
What happened?
As far as we can tell, there's a police officer, a former police officer now, who had been following us. I didn't know it at the time.
Is he the same police officer that gave your daughter that teddy bear?
He has admitted that, yes, sir.
Did you ever see him? Like, did she say, there he is, Mommy? Did you want to see who gave this to your daughter?
I didn't see anybody. There was no one dressed as a police officer. There was no police car.
When you refer to this police officer, are you familiar with his name or who he is?
James Glover.
James Glover.
I mean, do you think he had something to do with it?
I do, yes.
You do?
You really do. Let's go back to the night at the store when your daughter's missing. What happens?
We went down through the parking lot to into the store. I was just kind of talking to her over my shoulder, not really paying much attention. And when I got to the deli section, I turned around to say something to her, and she wasn't there. She just wasn't there.
What's going through your mind? Your daughter's missing. How did you feel?
I was afraid. I was afraid for her.
Did you murder Taylor?
No.
Was it you?
No.
So those people that say you're guilty, what do you tell them? What do you want to tell them?
What's happened to me is irrelevant, but the person that did this needs to be punished. That's what I want to see done. That's what gets me through every day.
Well, what do you think?
She doesn't have me totally convinced yet. How about you?
Yeah, I feel like that too, because tears.
I didn't like her eye contact.
Right, I know, a lot of downtime. Yeah.
You think they were crocodile tears too?
Could have been, I've seen tears. Maybe there's another side to this woman.
So we have to look for a motive.
Macon is a fairly small and tight-knit community. And when the trial of Teresa Fargusen got underway, the townspeople were suddenly faced with the question of whether a mother could be capable of murdering her own daughter.
When you wake up in the middle of the night, you've had a nightmare. You turn to your mama to console you, to be there for you. Taylor couldn't do that on June the 9th because the nightmare was real and the monster was her mama.
At the time, the prosecutor, Howard Sims, was a young assistant in the district attorney's office. Today, he's the DA. Was there anything that she said to the police or to anyone that made her look like a suspect, or she acted funny?
She never acted like a grieving mother, if you know what I mean. She seemed to be upset, but she was upset that she was a suspect. She wanted to know what the evidence was and if that evidence indicated that she had done it, more so than she seemed to be concerned about the fact that her daughter was dead.
Were you looking at any other suspects in this case?
The police went out and started interviewing people from the store. That was where they started. Nobody at the store ever saw this child come in that night. And in fact, there was a witness who saw Teresa Fargusen come through the door alone, and he testified in the trial that the daughter was not with her.
Was the husband ever a suspect?
No. The husband's whereabouts were fairly ironcladly accounted for. And I believe he was at work that night. The boyfriend was somewhere else.
Was he ever a suspect?
No, he was never a suspect. She had talked to the boyfriend earlier that night. They had a fairly extended phone call. It lasted almost 20 minutes. And what I suspect and what we argued at trial was that the two of them had an argument, and he took his phone off the hook. My position was that she was trying to get back through to her boyfriend, and she was trying to get Taylor to go to bed. Taylor wouldn't go to bed. She kept getting up. I think that the frustration just built and built and built until finally the little girl got up. She was the closest thing to take it out on, and she grabbed her with the blanket, put it over her face, and she suffocated her.
They had a tap on her phone? One of those tapes became very critical. That tape, what was on that tape?
We played a couple of tapes. One was an hour-long conversation between she and her boyfriend, during which she whispered something. And it sounded to me and to a lot of other people like what she said was, "I suffocated her."
Did it sound like, or was it that she said those words?
It sounded to me like she said, "I suffocated her."
Is it in fact the truth that this tape was sent to the FBI and the FBI deemed this tape inaudible?
The FBI would not say what the whispered part was, or they didn't say what it was. And I don't remember if they classified it as inaudible or not.
When we spoke to her yesterday, she mentioned another suspect, a possible officer of the law.
James Glover.
There's a lot of contention about Officer Glover. Did you never consider him a suspect?
There was no evidence that connected him to the crime scene. We knew where he was when the child went missing.
There was allegations that he may have actually been stalking Teresa. Were those ever looked into by the DA's office?
Yeah, we never saw any evidence that he had stalked her.
Did you care? I mean, you cared about getting a child killer. That was on your mind?
Yeah. All I wanted was to know who killed the little girl. I didn't care if it was her or anybody else. At the trial, I called her a monster from hell. It took a monster from hell to do what was done to this child.
The evidence presented by the district attorney was pretty convincing, and all of this information put us back to square one.
We got a couple more people we have to find, and we have to interview them. Once we interview them, the picture will become crystal clear.
Right.
Right now, we still got a little cloud. It stopped raining, but it's still cloudy.
Reggie and I wanted to talk to James Glover. We had a lead that he was still living in the area.
He could be within a 5 to 10 mile radius.
I think he's very close. I'm sure he lives, I don't see him living here in the city. I see him living out more in the suburbs.
Although the DA said Glover had an alibi, we still weren't convinced that it was solid. In the following week, we came across information that cast doubt on that alibi and led us to believe that Teresa's stalking claims might have been true. Teresa's immediate family lives in a small town of Talladega, Alabama, about a 5-hour drive from Macon.
We should find out a couple of things about Teresa's personality.
Now, this is the old thing. The apple doesn't fall far from the tree. So let's see what the family is like. I think we'll get a good idea what Teresa is like. This is who she grew up with.
At the trial, not one member of Fargusen's family was called to testify. It might have had something to do with a statement her stepsister, Bobby Ann, gave to investigators. She recounted how Teresa told her to wash Taylor's sheets with bleach before the police arrived. Bobby Ann thought this was strange and seemed to indicate that Teresa was acting unusual.
What they said I said, that's not what I said. They changed everything I said around.
It was misconstrued. Well, what did you say?
The sheets was took off the bed, but not the way they say they was took off.
That was a damaging statement. Really damaging.
Mm-hmm.
You made it. Did you sign that statement?
No, sir. I have never seen that statement.
You never saw that statement?
I never saw the statement, and I've never read. Until Martha gave it to me to read, that's the first time I have read it.
Do you think Teresa's capable of ever doing anything like this?
No, to nobody else, especially her daughter. There's not a doubt in our mind.
Were you shocked when you heard this, when she was accused of this?
Let me tell you, Teresa was one of the best mothers in our family. I mean, I'm not exaggerating when I tell you that. Teresa was a good mother.
Better mother than I was. I thought I was pretty good.
I do.
You say that Teresa is definitely innocent. You have information, hard evidence that there's someone else involved in this.
That would be James Glover, the police officer.
Glover's the same guy that gave Taylor
the teddy bear 5 hours before her death.
5 hours before her death.
Right.
Now, there was mention of Glover stalking Teresa, right?
Oh, yes.
Yes.
Now, do you have evidence about that, or can you substantiate that anyway?
And the fact that he was there at her home the next day after Taylor died, and he was not part of the investigation whatsoever.
So the day at the car wash, he gives her a teddy bear, and you're saying the very next day after her murder.
Right, he was there when they searched her home.
He was there at the house. Is that it? And that may not be considered stalking by a lot of people. You understand that?
Mm-hmm. Did you ever see James Glover?
We saw him. Didn't know who he was.
We didn't know who he was at the time. Tuesday.
This is right after the murder?
It was on Tuesday. This guy comes up to the door with a deli tray, sandwich meats and stuff from Kroger. And Martha and I go to the door, and he hands it to us, and we ask him if he wants to sign the register, who he was and what he was bringing, and he basically just shoved it at us.
So what you're saying is the person that brought that tray to the house, that was James Glover?
Yes.
We know now it was
We know
James
now
Glover.
it was.
We
didn't know then.
In your minds, who's guilty of this crime?
James Glover.
James Glover.
James Glover.
Do you see the day when Teresa's going to get out of jail?
We're working for the day for her to get out. We won't stop.
You won't stop.
No.
Never stop.
You keep plugging, huh?
Teresa was innocent. So that to this family, that's all it needs to be said. She's innocent.
We learned a lot from this.
Well, I learned that she has a wonderful family, I can tell you that.
Yeah.
She has a good family. I mean, they didn't say one thing bad about her, the way she raised Taylor. Bobby Ann explained her statement away that she never signed it.
That's a good point, that she never signed the statement.
One thing I could tell you.
What?
The gas is cheaper here than in New York.
Yeah, look at that.
God almighty.
The prosecution presented the jury with 3 key pieces of forensic evidence. A hair found in Taylor's hand, a bloodstain found on Taylor's blanket, and a tire mark found on Taylor's arm. Dr. Joseph Burton was the former medical examiner for Metropolitan Atlanta and the defense's forensic expert, but he was never called to testify.
The day they wanted me to testify, I had something else that I was committed to. So what our agreement was that unless he thought that my actual presence there would make a difference, then I was not going to go testify in person. That's how it came about that I didn't testify. In retrospect, I wished I had gone there.
You believe that if you would have testified, you would have put forward some reasonable doubt to the jury?
It's possible because, you know, you can present the same forensic evidence like the glass that's half full of water. Is it half empty or is it half full of water? You tell the jury there are 46 out of 70 some odd hairs that are traumatically pulled that are found on 5 different items. You don't tell them how many hairs are on which items and how many are traumatically pulled. You don't tell the jury that traumatically pulled can simply mean that I shake my head and a hair falls out, or that the average adult loses 100 hairs a day from their head and body.
So that percentage didn't mean that much to you?
No, it did not mean that much.
Insignificant?
It doesn't tell you who did it, doesn't tell you where it happened.
What about the mother's hair in her head?
Yeah,
well,
it was one hair, I believe.
One hair, right.
What about that?
What does that mean?
Could have been the last hair that she went to grasp from somebody?
Sure, you could reach out and grab for somebody and somehow get a hair stuck on your hand. But there's so many other ways that that could happen that unless there's some other evidence to go along with that, that's speculation. Sheer speculation. The saliva on the blanket, it's a blanket she lives with, basically.
Right.
Saliva on my pillowcase. So, I mean, what does that prove? It proves nothing, because it's a blanket that she uses constantly according to...
Could that have been determined by a lab?
No.
How old that blood, how old that saliva was on the blanket?
You couldn't say it happened an hour ago, a day ago, 3 days ago.
Right, so there's that reasonable doubt again.
The other thing that I would have focused on is the tire mark on the arm. The district attorney or the prosecutor were alleging that Ms. Fargusen had placed her by the roadside, then in the haste of leaving had run over her arm. That match, to me, is the most worrisome thing about all of the evidence. I forget how many number of similar tires just in the state of Georgia that were like this tread pattern. Now,
So the forensic evidence in this case doesn't stand that it should convict.
when you take that tire print away, nothing else, collectively or standing alone, says that anyone, including Teresa Fargusen, should have been charged with a crime.
I have more reasonable doubt to believe now that he straightened out that thing about the hairs.
The blood on the blanket he explained away. A lot of things he explained. The only thing we know for sure, she was alive at 9 o'clock, and at 11:10 she was found dead. And that's it. Over the next few days, Reggie and I used some contacts to try to hunt down information on James Glover. All right. The addresses we were getting on him were old news. Okay, thanks a lot. Bye-bye. Reggie and I felt like we were onto something. We found a few witness statements that were leading us to believe Teresa's story. But we still weren't totally convinced that she was innocent. The more we learned about the death of Taylor Fargusen, the more we wondered what was really going on. First, allegations of a police officer's involvement, and now, new revelations about Teresa's own defense strategy. I read through a lot of the documents, and it seemed like there was a lot of reasonable doubt that could have been brought up, but it wasn't, or it wasn't proved to the jury. Maybe the prosecutor made a more passionate case or more dramatic statements. The jury went along and convicted her. The DA told us that one witness saw Teresa coming into the Kroger alone that night. But in the case file, there was another witness that police talked to, a juvenile court judge named McGehee, who was also in the store. He testified that he saw a little girl with brown hair wearing clothing that was grayish or light lavender, and he thought the child was dressed strangely. Could he have been referring to the pajamas Taylor was found wearing? His testimony seemed to prove that there was at least one little girl in the store that night. Could it have been Taylor? Then, we tracked down this man, Thomas Kendrick Holmes.
Well, I went to Kroger's at about 10 o'clock, a little bit after 10, and I saw a little girl. She was a small blonde girl, probably around 6 years old. And she had on a sort of a blouse. It was flowery blouse.
Now, let me get this. You were going in to the store. Was this like the first passageway, the first door to get into the store? Then you saw this girl coming out the same side that you were entering in? She was coming out that same way?
Sort of that way. She had was either fixing to come out, or she looked like she might have been going the wrong way. She was just sort of standing there.
Standing there.
Just standing there. Alone?
Alone.
Did the police tell you that they'd be in touch with you at a later date, or the district attorney be calling you, anything like that?
They expressed a doubt that if it was that the person that I saw was the little girl.
They expressed the doubt that it
I
was.
just assumed that my testimony was not needed, and didn't think any more of it.
Now there were two witnesses who say they saw a little girl in the Kroger that night. But why wasn't Holmes asked to testify?
Thanks. Thank you, sir.
Then we found a police report from the night of the murder. A suspicious man had been spotted outside the Kroger supermarket. There was also a report of a man driving by with a child in a white car. According to the police investigation, Glover owned two cars at that time. One was a white Camaro.
Hey, Reg, I just got from the fax machine. Check this out.
What you got?
Oh, the dispatcher sheet. Look how many times they ran the plate, though.
Same guy running the plate. Glover running the plate all those times.
That's right. Glover.
According to the defense, Glover had run Teresa's license plate numerous times after the murder, giving him Teresa's name and address. It wasn't the proof we were looking for that Glover had been stalking Teresa prior to Taylor's death, but it did seem odd.
Just say James. Yell out James. James?
Our contacts finally came through with a good address on Glover.
Where's 755? Uh-huh.
He was living about a half an hour outside of Macon in the neighboring town of Haddock.
He's at the top of the hill, right?
Yeah, top of the hill.
11 months after Taylor's murder, Glover resigned from the Macon Police Department after pleading guilty to reporting a false crime. One night, while on patrol, he radioed in that he had stopped to question a suspicious-looking man. Minutes later, Glover called for help, saying he had been shot twice in the chest. At first, he was hailed as a hero, but when his story didn't add up, his own colleagues started asking questions. Glover finally confessed that he made the whole thing up. He had actually taken off his vest, shot it twice, and then put it back on and called for help, all in an attempt to impress his estranged wife.
You know, to do something like that, you gotta be a little off the wall, to say the least. So a guy like that concerns me, you know, who knows? I see no cars or nothing here.
Yeah, you know.
No, doesn't look like it. But let's see. It doesn't, you know, it doesn't look, Reggie, like anybody's even been here. Hello? Anybody? Well, the one thing that's good is everything panned out.
Yeah.
The address.
But it looks like they were there recently because they pruned the
all the roses
roses.
Yeah, I think somebody's around. Yeah, we'll come up with them. Just a matter of time, man. Just a matter of time. What do you think would have happened to that case if you were allowed to testify and say what you know?
She probably never would have been convicted.
Reggie and I were still on a fence about Teresa, and finding James Glover was more important than ever. Our investigation led us to an attorney who negotiated a plea bargain for Glover back when he was prosecuted for faking his own shooting. That attorney was Lynn Finney, and a few months later, Glover went to see Finney again. This time he heard that he was being looked at in the death of Taylor Fargusen.
Well, I guess because I had represented him before, he thought to come back to me. And he and his mother came to my office and we had an interview.
What happened?
Why he was there?
I'm trying to be real careful about how I say it. Some information was just thrown out as a result of the dialogue between mother and son, at which point I said, stop right there, don't say anything else.
But you hear things that can affect the outcome of a trial.
I would think so, yes. But really didn't know what I could or should do with the information. And so the trial commenced sometime later, and it looked like the trial was going really badly for Miss Fargusen. And it was that point that went over to the attorney's office and told them everything I've told you. So the next morning, before the trial resumed, Judge Culpepper had an in-chambers hearing, and this was the issue, whether the information that I had was admissible or not. Anyway, the judge ruled rather quickly that the attorney-client privilege would stand, and therefore I would not be able to testify as to what took place in my office.
But this is like a catch-22. You're damned if you do and damned if you don't. You have information.
Well, again, you know, I can't go into that.
I understand that, and that's got to be a lot of anguish on you because it puts you in a position where it's a real tough issue to live with.
The information would have definitely been exculpatory as to Miss Fargusen. That doesn't mean I'm not presuming to say, oh, I know who really killed her. I'm not going to go that far.
What'd you say?
It's just not black and white.
But it would have changed. It would have changed the outlook. If what information you would have gave on the stand
would definitely have changed.
What do you think would have happened to that case if you were allowed to testify and say what you know?
Well, I think the reasonable doubt would be obvious.
It would be very obvious.
Yeah, she probably never would have been convicted.
Were you approached by James Glover again after that?
After that, yeah, after the trial was over. I was in the Kroger, of all places. At the time, my 13-year-old daughter was just a toddler. I had her in the little place where the children sit in the shopping cart, and I was doing my grocery shopping and came around a corner, and there he was. And he stops me, you know, standing in front of me, and he said, "Oh, I didn't know you had such a pretty little daughter." And then he said, "I bet you have to be really careful that nothing happens to her."
So you obviously took that as a threat.
I took my child out of the basket and left my groceries there and went and got in the car and left.
You believe that? She could have blown the top off of that.
I know. I think we had her. We were this close. Yeah.
And she was a reasonable, intelligent, fair-mannered person. I didn't even expect her to be that level-headed.
I found her very credible. I liked her. And she was as candid as she could be, and I understand this situation she's in. I mean, as bad as I wanted to know, and I think someday it'll come out, but she's being muffled by the courts, and that's the system.
We have to find James Glover.
Yeah.
We have to find him.
Glover was proving hard to find. We went to his house again, but like the first time, he wasn't there. So I decided to call around to some of the places where he might work.
This is Quarry Center Company.
You have James Glover working there?
No, we sure don't.
You don't? Okay, what's the other quarry in the area? Maybe I got the wrong one. You got the number for the other one? Good morning. James Glover, please?
Who?
James Glover?
I don't know who you're talking about.
Good morning.
Good morning.
James Glover, please.
You looking for Stick? Who's this?
This is Tom.
Oh, hey.
Hey, how are you?
Fine, how are you? Where have you been hiding at?
I don't know. I've been all over the place. But where's James? He gonna be in today? Not sure what I said, but whatever it was, it turned out to be enough. It should be right up here. Yeah, there it is. This is where it works. Hey, we're looking for James Glover.
Stick man.
Yeah, Stick Man. This is the girl I was talking to earlier. How you doing? James. James Glover.
James Glover.
Yeah, how you doing?
How you doing?
Jerry Palace.
Hi, I'm
That's
Reggie Britt. How you
Reggie
feeling?
Britt.
How you been?
How you?
We're with Court TV.
Okay.
Did you know Teresa at all? Did you ever know Teresa? Did you ever meet Teresa before or after the murder? No. Did
That's all in the-
But you met Taylor that day, and you gave her.
Yeah,
a
all
teddy
that
bear.
came out.
That's all true.
What do you think about Lynn Finney?
Who?
The
Lynn
lawyer
Finney.
you went to when you had. If you don't want to talk about that, what about that?
Yeah,
She's what?
I don't.
She had information about you that would have set Teresa Fargusen out, sent her out
I
of
don't know
jail.
what kind of information she had. I don't know what she could have known about anything.
You mean
So there's no information that she had?
I don't know of. I mean, there's
For what?
nothing that she...
I mean, you know, she went to the judge, she went to the district attorney, the judge, and all that.
I understand all that, and what she could have told that would have so-called blow this thing wide open, I have no idea what kind of information she would have had.
And you're innocent.
Somebody was charged
And
with it.
you're innocent. You did nothing.
Give me a break. You asking me if I'm innocent?
I mean, you're telling everybody. Listen, we're not.
How many times I got to stand here and tell you yes?
Okay.
I had nothing
All right.
to do with anything with that case whatsoever.
All right. But anyway, listen.
I got to go to work.
We wish we had more time to ask Glover a few more questions. What about running Teresa's license plate? Why did he bring a deli tray to her house after Taylor's funeral? What did he tell Lynn Finney? But what would his motive be?
The little time we had with him wasn't enough, and we couldn't. He wasn't going to answer any of our questions.
He was dancing.
Yeah, doing a real tap dance.
A real good tap dance.
A few days later, we contacted Glover again by telephone, but he refused to elaborate any further. We had no way to know if Glover was involved in the crime. But the more we searched, the more we seemed to uncover doubts about Teresa's guilt. But there was something Teresa was hiding from us. We both felt it during our interview. And her demeanor, you're telling me her demeanor was very calm? There was no tears even after the body was found. So the following week, we decided to head back to the prison and clear some things up.
Something happened and you did something to Taylor and you put your hand over her mouth. I mean, nothing like that?
Reggie and I had learned a lot about Teresa Fargusen and the murder of her daughter, Taylor. We both felt that our 2-year investigation would come down to what Teresa would say in this second meeting.
We want to give her as many questions as we can, hardball questions.
We got to get her a little unsettling and hit her hard and see can we get her away from that first interview. Something about that first interview that, to me, that she wasn't being truthful.
Yeah.
You know, I could even understand if something happened that evening and you were frustrated. And I can understand that. If you, emotionally, you were just drained and something happened and you did something to Taylor and you put your hand over her mouth.
No.
I mean, nothing like that?
No. And I made a lot of mistakes in my life. I made a lot of mistakes as a mother. Murdering my daughter wasn't one of them.
That's not what happened.
I can't go back and change that night. I can't go back and pay more attention. I can't go back and hold her hand. I can't go back and change any of that. But that doesn't make me a murderer. That doesn't make me a mom that goes over the edge.
Well, who else had the opportunity?
I didn't know James Glover even knew who I was. I didn't know who he was. I still don't know who he is. I wish Lynn Finney could tell us something. I wish James Glover could tell us something. I don't know.
On the witness stand, when you were testifying, and they played that tape, and Mr. Sims said that you said, I smothered my child. What did you say?
I told him that I didn't say that that's not what I said.
And what did you say?
I think I said I'm so scared.
Do you feel that there was corruption in the Macon Police Department?
I know that that they threatened witnesses.
They threatened Charles? Change his opinion of you?
I've not spoken to him, so I don't know.
When did he change his opinion of you? Was it after you told him that you failed the lie detector test?
I never told him that.
You never told him that?
No.
Well, he said in court, he said on the stand that you told him.
He perjured himself because I never spoke to him.
You think he lied about that?
Yes, I do.
I ask you again.
Are you responsible? Are you?
No.
Did you ever see any pictures of your daughter when they found her on that road?
No.
You never saw her?
The only thing they ever showed me was a picture of her arm.
Show the picture we have with the, you know.
It's going to be tough for you, but this is the picture of her on that road.
You never seen those photos?
The only time they ever had any out was during the trial.
Did you have any idea if that's how she was found? You want me to take it away?
Take it.
Maybe this will make you feel better, Teresa.
Teresa, people call you the monster from hell because of this, what happened to your daughter. They say you are the murderer. What do you say to those people?
I loved my daughter. I was a single mom that made mistakes, but I loved my daughter.
Last time I walked out of here, I had my doubts. But this was a lot of emotions. I really
Very
felt
emotional. She did today with us today wasn't an act. That was a human emotion. But it seems to be that they railroaded this poor girl and convicted her.
She wasn't a local, came from out of town, out of state.
And they had tunnel vision. They pointed their whole investigation toward this young lady, and they didn't look anywhere else. They didn't look at anything else.
I mean, for a year and a half, they tried to make a case against this girl. And the case they made was not even that good. It was a weak case.
It was circumstantial evidence.
A lot of weak circumstantial evidence.
From the time of Taylor's death, it took the police another year and a half to finally file charges against Teresa Fargusen. But in our opinion, the investigation was nothing more than an orchestrated witch hunt, intent on gathering enough circumstantial evidence to prosecute and convict Teresa at any cost. But without some sort of new evidence, this is where Teresa Fargusen will likely remain for the rest of her life. I don't think we'll ever know if James Glover was involved in Taylor's death. But we think Teresa got a raw deal and should have never been convicted, let alone arrested in the first place. When they divorced in 1990, Teresa took sole custody of Taylor and decided to stay in Macon so that Taylor could be near her father for weekend visitations.
Hello, Mr. Charles Fargusen, please? Miss Fargusen, how do you do? This is Jerry Palace from Court TV. Okay, I was wondering if it'd be possible to come see you. We wanted to speak to you since you're her ex-husband and father of, Right.
Charlie didn't want to talk to us on camera, but he did say that he thought the right person was behind bars.
You had stood behind her, but then you changed when, for some reason...
When he took the stand at Teresa's trial, it was evident why he turned against his ex-wife.
And you are convinced now that Teresa did it all?
She failed 3 lie detectors tests, didn't she?
No, sir, she didn't.
I believe she did.
No, sir, she did not. Did not. Is that what the police told you?
She told me at the gravesite.
She told you at the gravesite?
Teresa did, yeah.
Okay, Rich, this is it.
This is a Kroger's.
It was Teresa's second trip to the store that day, a fact that heightened the suspicions of the police.
This is the same time of night.
Yeah.
10 o'clock.
This is a big
That's
store.
a full-time
Full-time
this
thing,
place.
yeah.
I mean, look, people going in, the cars are moving in and out on a regular basis here, so.
On the first trip, she says she purchased the ingredients to make a recipe from scratch. But when it got too late, she claims she changed her mind and returned to the store in order to buy a ready-made dish instead.
Within an hour's time, some woman discovers the body a short distance from here. You know what, let's go take a look at that. Let's go to the crime scene. Okay.
According to the prosecution's theory, Teresa's second trip to the Kroger that night was nothing more than an attempt to create an alibi. They theorized that she killed Taylor between 8:30 and 10 p.m. in her home, and then drove to the outskirts of town and dumped the body on the side of the road.
This is it.
I get an eerie feeling.
Huh? Oh, man.
See?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this is it. Look at this. Somebody opens the door, just puts the body down right there. Takes it out of off this front seat, back seat, whatever, and puts the kid right down.
The light shines on this part of the road. It's not even, 4 to 5 feet from the pavement.
I asked myself, why this person just take the body? You're leaving it here to be found, right?
Yeah,
you're not leaving it here. You're not looking to hide anything.
If they wanted to, they should have taken it a little further and have been in the woods.
I mean, it wouldn't take that long to put a body into the woods. This is a pretty deserted road.
They wanted it to be found. But maybe not that quick, but they wanted her to be found.
Yeah.
Man.
Let's get out of
Let's
here.
go, Richard. Makes the hair on the back of my neck stand up, something like this.
There's
I kill somebody, I want to hide the body. They wanted it to be found.
She was charged with suffocating her 6-year-old daughter.
An unspeakable crime.
And the mom with the tail is right in this place.
The killer sent away for the rest of her life.
You didn't smother her. Drive to a deserted road.
It doesn't look like anybody's been here. Hello?
And if you were allowed to testify,
She probably never would have been convicted.
A mother searches for the truth from behind prison walls.
do you know who murdered Taylor?
I think I do, yes.
My name is Jerry Pallas. I'm a former NYPD detective. Court TV asked me and my partner, fellow NYPD detective Reggie Britt, to look into the 1991 murder of 6-year-old Taylor Fargusen. The murder has sparked controversy in Georgia, igniting claims that the wrong person is behind bars.
You have some time now? I want to talk to you about the Fargusen case.
On a Sunday evening in June 1991, the child's mother, Teresa Fargusen, says she took her daughter to a grocery store in Macon, Georgia. According to Teresa, a few minutes later, she realized that Taylor was missing, and she began searching the store. With no sign of her daughter, Teresa became frantic and asked an employee for help. The police were called in, and about an hour later, Taylor was found dead by the side of a road in a rural area about 6 miles away from the store. The investigation dragged on, and over a year later, the police announced that finally they had a suspect. When it was all over, Teresa Fargusen was found guilty of murdering her daughter and sentenced to life in prison. To this day, Fargusen insists that she's innocent and is the victim of a police department cover-up meant to protect one of their own, a former Macon cop, who Fargusen says is the real killer.
I mean, she may be the wrong person. We won't know till we get there.
If Teresa's claims are true, then an innocent woman is behind bars and a child killer is out walking the streets. We went down to Georgia to see if we could find out the truth, once and for all.
Well, from what we know, there wasn't too much physical evidence, if any.
This happened in June 1991.
Right.
This girl wasn't arrested until
It was like a year and a half later. This guy's her appeals attorney, right? Finley?
Yes, he is. He's an appeals
He's the appeals attorney.
First stop was in an Atlanta suburb. We wanted to talk to Drew Finley, Teresa Fargusen's lawyer.
We'll have to find out from him what he's got. And,
yeah, he should clear up a lot of this for us.
This is the beginning of the journey, man.
I want you to give us the facts of the case.
Okay.
How this happened to Teresa.
June 9th of 1991, Teresa Fargusen was at home with her 6-year-old daughter, Taylor. At approximately 9 o'clock that evening, she gathered her daughter up and took her to a Kroger grocery store. She lost contact with her, started running around the aisles looking for her, and started calling out her name. Immediately, people came to her aid. They started looking. She was not found. Approximately 11 o'clock that night, she was found on a service road on the side of a highway. A deputy coroner showed up. He immediately said, Taylor's been dead from sometime between 7 and 9. All attention was drawn to Teresa Fargusen at that time. Given that she had been at the Kroger sometime past 9, she immediately became a suspect in the case.
Okay, so she becomes a suspect at that point?
For 9.5 months, she was not arrested. For 9.5 months, there was no evidence found to support that she had anything to do with this death. And what do we have? We've got a woman that, as far as I'm concerned, is sitting in jail for the remainder of her natural life, who's innocent. And how anybody in law enforcement and how anybody in prosecution can go to sleep at night knowing what they've done is atrocious.
In the summer of 1980, Teresa Fargusen moved to Georgia from her hometown of Talladega, Alabama. A few years later, she met Charlie Fargusen. The couple married in February 1984, and 10 months later, Taylor was born.